Call this meeting of Owen Sound City Council to order. We are here at Grey County as we're still awaiting our repairs to our own council chamber. And I certainly hope that we're going to have a good Christmas present and we could be back in our home chambers. We have had our in-camera portion and we're now in a regular council meeting. I'll ask for the faith blessing this evening is Doctor, I just gave you some kind of a new title there. Pastor Dave. Dave Matthew of Crossroads Victory Church is here to share with us.
Thank you for the opportunity to come and pray for council. So let us pray. Father, I thank you for our mayor and each of our council members. We pray tonight for your wisdom and your direction in all their deliberations and all that they do on behalf of our city. We ask you to continue to bless them, give them continued insight and wisdom. We ask for this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you. Are there any additional items? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a bouquet to give out to staff.
Any other members of council? Staff? Seeing none. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Councillor Twaddle.
Thank you, Your Worship. I may declare pecuniary interest during the discussion, the DIA presentation on parking, depending on what they say, since I don't know what they're going to say. But if there's a discussion around property owners paying an additional levy, then I will continue to declare the pecuniary interest that I left before. And I just wanted to know let the DIA know that if I get up and leave, it's not out of disrespect.
Thank you for that. Confirmation of the minutes, please, from our September 24th.
I did a declaration as well. I'll be declaring a pecuniary interest on 11A about the arbitration process.
Anyone else? Seeing none. Confirmation of minutes, please, from September 24th.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McManaman that the minutes of the regular meeting of City Council held on September 24th, 2012 as printed be adopted.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. And minutes from the special council meeting on October 5th.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McManaman that the minutes of the special meeting of City Council held on October 5th, 2012 as printed be adopted.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Resolution moving council into committee of the whole, please.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McManaman that City Council now go into committee of the whole to consider public meetings, deputations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports, matters tabled, motions for which notice was previously given, and other business.
All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We are now in committee of the whole. We do not have any public meetings this evening, but we do have a number of deputations, and I'll invite our first deputation is Linda Van Aalst from the Kiwanis Club. And I see that the new president is also accompanying Linda. Gord Harris. Welcome.
Thank you. Your Worship, members of council, staff, I'm wondering if we could have Your Worship join us here. It's a great honor for us to be here this evening to present another check in our installment to the city. We had pledged a total of $190,000 towards the playground at the park. 150 of that was from Kiwanis Club, and then another $40,000 through a Trillium grant that we were able to get. So we are very honored to be here again this evening to present a check for $30,000.
We're delighted.
We are coming to the end of that.
We're delighted to accept. Thank you so much. Thanks very much, Mr. President. Absolutely.
You guys stand over here because we got the slideshow on here. Let's get it out of that. Okay, here we go. Excellent.
Thank you very much. Thanks to Kiwanis for all that. Don't fold it up.
The bank.
Yeah.
had the great pleasure of attending the induction meeting at the Kiwanis organization on Saturday night, and it was a raucous event, and congratulate Linda Van Aalst as the outgoing president, and all the best to Gord Harris as the incoming president. City of Owen Sound certainly appreciates the hard work and the support that you've given us over the years, so I thank you. Our next deputation is Virginia Eichhorn, and Virginia is the Director-Curator of the Tom Thompson Art Gallery, and Mindy Gill, the Curator of the Owen Sound Museums. They're here to tell us about the Honoring Local Veterans event.
Yes, thank you, and we're very pleased to be here and to speak to you about this really wonderful event that the Billy Bishop Home and Museum has been undertaking for a number of years. And Mindy, who is our Curator of Collections, has been the one who's been really spearheading and working with the veterans on this particular project. So I'd like to invite Mindy to tell you a bit more about it.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so this year actually marks our 12th annual Honoring Our Local Veterans event, and we will be honoring 10 veterans this year. And each year we try to represent all of the different branches of service. So this year we have mostly Army and Air Force veterans. We try to include men and women, Navy and Merchant Marine. It just so happened that this year we didn't get any Navy veterans. I can give you a list of their names. We have Paul Armstrong, Norm Barracliff, Eva Daly, Arthur Lobslinger, John Cloud, Joseph Wilmer Najuan. Everybody knows him mostly as the Indian Carver. We have Earl Porter, Ed Saunders, Wolf Wallace, and Frederick Wilkinson, who actually just celebrated his 100th birthday not too long ago. So each year, we try to incorporate the veterans and the youth so that it's a passing of the knowledge on to the future generations, so that this isn't something that's forgotten. And for our veterans, the main stipulation is that they come from Grey and Bruce counties, and they have resided here at some point in their life, either before or after their service. So over the past 11 years, we've honored 93 veterans. So this year actually will make 103. So we've crossed the 100 mark, and we're hoping to continue this on for a good while longer. This year, all of our veterans are World War II veterans, but we've also been going further into honoring Korean veterans, and we're hoping to go on further down the line. So our very first ceremony we actually held at the Billy Bishop Museum, but there was so much interest that we actually had to find a larger venue. So we've moved it to the Legion, which now holds well over 300 people, and each year we get more and more people, and the interest from the veterans and their families and the public itself has been a wonderful response. This year, with our honoring of Wilmer Najuan, it actually marks the first time we're honoring a First Nations veteran. So we're very proud and very excited to be able to do that this year. So these are our sponsors. Did you want to? Okay. And then, of course, we'd like to acknowledge and thank all of our volunteers, the City of Owen Sound, tourism. The Legion works with us on this, and we've been able to work with other legions in the area. So we've been able to expand the program to include more and more veterans as we go along.
And again, we would like to invite everyone who is interested and available to come for Sunday afternoon's event. It will be really quite wonderful and quite moving and quite informative. And also this year, for the first time, the plaques that we have that have been created in honor of the veterans, we will be installing them in the Heritage Square Mall. So they'll be up from the end of October all the way through November. They'll be up during Remembrance Day. So again, it's a great opportunity for an extensive number of people within the community to have that chance to find out a little bit more about our veterans and the important contributions that they've played. So, any questions?
Thank you very much. Councilor Lott.
I'm not sure if I heard the date and time.
It's October 21st.
Yes, so this coming Sunday.
Yes.
Time.
Doors open at 12:45.
Any further questions, comments? Thank you very much. This really is a wonderful event each and every year, and I look forward to being there on Sunday. I wonder, are we going to be outdoors?
No.
Thank you.
So it will be more protected than our June event was, which was actually colder than I think it is now.
I think you're right. Yeah, no, it's a wonderful event, and thank you for all the work you do.
Great, thank you.
And we have, our last deputation this evening is Dave Parsons. Dave is a member of the Owen Sound Downtown Improvement Area Board, and Dave is here to provide a deputation on the downtown parking. Welcome.
Thank you. Your Worship, City Councilors, City staff, and members of the public, thank you for this opportunity for the Owen Sound DIA to provide City Council and the public with information and recommendations for an approach to parking in the downtown core that will ensure the downtown remains vibrant for residents and visitors to our city. The mandate of the Owen Sound DIA under the Ontario Municipal Act is to promote the area as a business or shopping area. The DIA works with the City of Owen Sound to accomplish the city's vision and mission and its official plan and strategic directions, to maintain the importance of the downtown and waterfront as a focus of growth and a key resource in the city, and to give high priority to the implementation of plans and policies aimed at enhancing and revitalizing the city's downtown core and waterfront. Today, I am here on behalf of the DIA Board and members because we believe that the city needs a coherent, sustainable parking strategy before it purchases new meters. The decision of Council around parking, the plans for replacement parking meters, and the costs of these decisions to the city and to the DIA membership are of central importance to the Owen Sound DIA, and we believe to the public. The DIA is committed to working with the city to build a parking approach that meets the needs of the city, ratepayers, businesses, and shoppers in downtown. We urge City Council to listen to the citizens this evening and reflect on finding a win-win solution for parking. We need an approach to parking in the downtown that will benefit all of the stakeholders that share an interest in building and sustaining a vibrant and growing downtown. The Owen Sound DIA has 3 goals with this deputation: to communicate to Council the response from the public that the DIA has received in regards to parking in the downtown, and that was number 1. Number 2, to provide Council with the position of the DIA on key considerations that need to be included in a parking strategy for the downtown. And 3, to ask Council to reconsider purchasing new meters until we have a new parking strategy in place for the downtown. 1, most DIA membership and all of the directors of the DIA support an expanded complementary parking system. The results of a survey conducted June 12th to June 18th by the DIA and presented to many of our downtown businesses and their customers show that 97% of 1,137 people surveyed were in favor of expanding the complementary parking approach in downtown. I do have those surveys with me here, by the way, if anyone wants to dispute that fact. There are many communities that have implemented free or complimentary parking in their downtown, based on the principle that there are economic and community benefits to this approach. Brockville, Port Elgin, the City of Guelph are only a few examples of successful communities that allow short-term on-street parking in the downtown core with no meters. The current 2-hour free parking system in Owen Sound has been very successful and is a key component of the current vitality of the downtown. Recently in the Sun-Times, Mayor Deb Haswell says she would not support putting meters back in on the 2 free parking blocks of the downtown 2nd Avenue East. And I quote directly, "I do not believe that that is a positive step forward. I think that's really a step backwards," she said in an interview. I agree with you. Would you make note of that? I agreed with the mayor. I believe it is a step backwards to purchase meters that only accept coins. I had a plus 70-year-old and his wife shopping in my store just a few days ago. He stood at the front of my store looking out at his vehicle while his wife was making a purchase. He said he had not put money in the meter because he didn't have any coins, only a credit card. I thought he might like to be involved in the sale, so I offered him a quarter for the meter. He took the quarter and he put it in his pocket and kept looking out the window as she made the purchase without his input. I guess the next time I will feed the meter directly. I don't know that he would have used his credit card if we had ticket machines which accepted them, but at least he would not have had an excuse. Over the next 2 years, all of the meters in Brampton will be converted to pay-and-display machines. Advantages of pay-and-display machines, to mention only a few, are improved visual impact, fewer parking meters, reduced costs, fewer pieces of equipment to monitor and maintain, and they're also solar-powered so that they are operating on renewable energy. I know that we've gone through one whack of batteries over the last several years. Number 2, as a member of the Complementary Parking Review Ad Hoc Committee, I would like to clarify the motion presented during the last meeting. I quote from the minutes of September the 4th. Motion that the Complementary Parking Review Ad Hoc Committee recommends to City Council that Owen Sound does not follow the Brockville complementary parking model for financial reasons. This motion was defeated on endorsed division. Since the motion not to follow the Brockville model was defeated, I believe this leaves the door open for further discussion on some form of expanded complementary parking. 3, the Owen Sound DIA proposes the following for consideration by City Council. The Council consider expanding the 2-hour, it could be 90 minutes, it could be 1 hour, preferably 2, of complementary parking on 2nd Avenue East to include the blocks from 7th to 11th Street. The Owen Sound DIA would be willing to contribute to the costs of an expanded complementary parking system. The amount of the contribution would be decided by working with the city and coming directly from the Owen Sound DIA 2013 budget. I am sure we can work with the city to arrive at a budget number that would work to expand complementary parking. Our goal is to create a better and more positive experience for our downtown customers. A user pay system and non-user pay system could be designed to achieve this goal. Whatever system is implemented, it can be implemented to meet all of the needs of the users. Some details such as clear and visible signage, and I'd like to point out just one sign that I have here that says 2-hour maximum stay Monday to Saturday, 9 until 6 p.m., $1 per hour, free parking weekends and holidays. So, and I point that out just because we have people, half the people on Saturdays feed the meter and half them don't. We had a few people here tonight respond earlier that in fact they didn't know in fact that we didn't have to feed meters on Saturdays. Anyway, so some details such as clear and visible signage, time limits, enforcement, tickets, long-term and short-term parking, handicap spots need to be incorporated into the plan. Any proposed complementary parking model, whatever form it takes, should be up for review after a 1-year trial. I know that the first time that we introduced complementary parking for the 2 hours, and maybe it started with 1, but when we did that initially, it was supposed to be up for review and it never did get looked at, so we really don't know what happened or how in fact it did affect the downtown in either a positive or negative way. Those around me are certainly indicating that it was somewhat positive. So anyway, in closing, the Owen Sound DIA would like to thank Council for listening. We urge Council to consider the importance of the decisions they are making on parking and to focus on an approach to parking that will ensure the current and future vibrancy of downtown. Certainly parking in downtown is a complex and at times thorny issue for everyone involved. We may, I might like to suggest that we may never get it right, but if we don't try to make it better, the issue will not go away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave, for your presentation this evening. And although you didn't bring a great big check with you like the previous people, I did hear something in there that indicated that that could happen.
Linda did offer to hand you the check, which we could then
I'm sure, would you be comfortable taking a question or two, or would you, you're okay with that? Just if you could come back up to the podium. Any questions? Councillor Lemon.
Well, one of the things that was discussed with the Complementary Parking Review Committee was that certain facets of the operation of parking in Owen Sound was extremely expensive. One of them being within the Brockville model, they use the Canadian Corps of Commissioners for enforcement. And I'd like to get your take on that kind of efficiencies going into the parking system.
I think that, although that's a possibility, I think we need to start with steps that would in fact possibly reduce costs. And when you mentioned that, Peter, I believe we looked at present wages were in the neighborhood of 37% of gross revenues. That for any business is high. That's not acceptable. There were other considerations that, of course, you have mentioned and uncovered. That wasn't the nature of this deputation tonight, though. I do believe that at some point, if we are in fact wanting to look at parking as if it should pay its own way, then we need to consider it on a business model. And I'm not saying it's totally not business, but it needs to be looked at in a different fashion than it is presently. That way we could entertain the possibility of reducing costs and possibly implementing complementary parking in, I'd say, in little steps, and that's what I've rather hoped that we can endorse tonight.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of council who would like to ask a question? Mr. Parsons. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. And first to Mr. Parsons, I want to thank you. I know you're a volunteer on the committee, and you've done a lot of work on parking over the last several months, so I want to congratulate you for that and thank you for bringing it forward. Just so we're clear, the DIA proposal tonight is that to expand complementary parking from 7th to 8th and from 10th to 11th Street. Is that correct?
From 7th to 11th?
7th all the way through. So
all the way through,
two
yes.
additional blocks as compared to what it is now.
That's correct.
You did talk about credit cards and parking meters and pay and display machines, and without getting to that whole debate, I would encourage you and the DIA to read Mr. Ritchie's report on that. You did talk about running it efficiently as a business, and just to put it simply, parking meters with credit cards didn't make financial sense, and buying the new 55 new pay and display machines was much more expensive. So
when I hear the number 55, I feel that, I know that you've kind of said maybe we don't want to walk too far to get to that ticket spitter, if you would. If we were to start in smaller steps, it wouldn't be out of the way to think in that fashion.
And again, I didn't mean to start the debate. I would just encourage you to read Mr. Ritchie's report. And
I have done so. I also know that I can go to a car wash and put a credit card in a machine for $3, and I understand it's not the same in the sense that it's a more complex situation. But we all have credit and debit machines in our stores, and there are ways and means of putting those things together in such a fashion that it does not have to be the expense that that it appears to be. And there are communities that are using that. I guess I would invite further investigation into that area.
And my last, I guess, comment would be a certain level of frustration. The Parking Ad Hoc Committee had 3 DIA members on it. We met over the course of, I'm going to say 5 times, perhaps. We asked the DIA, we went through all the numbers. We asked the DIA to consider it. And now at, I guess, past the 11th hour, we're tonight voting on buying new machines to bring this forward. I guess it's never too late. But there is a certain amount of frustration. This is the first time we've heard of this version, I guess, this proposal, and it's just unfortunate we didn't have a lot more time to discuss the ramifications of this, the cost, what we need to take in revenue. Anyway, so I don't know where we go from here, but it's unfortunate that the longer we wait on any of these parking issues, the worse it gets. I know the police chief has said complaints have tripled in the last while because of the new coins and the fact that our machines don't take them. So the longer we wait, the more the complaints go up, the more the satisfaction.
Well, to that end, having talked with the police chief, there are two other issues that come to mind. One of them is that he was willing to reduce the cost of staff a very substantial number just by talking with him. And secondly, the revenues that they now have coming in would suggest that it's better than the past 3 years. So that's why, in a sense, to Councillor Lemon's proposal that perhaps we change to core commissionaires, it may be a possibility, but I think that the chief is doing a fine job of doing what he needs to do in terms of enforcement. To offer complimentary parking, that does not necessarily preclude raising fines and getting your monies in. The other part of that, though, is certainly reducing costs, which Councillor Lemon has alluded to, and our police chief is willing to look at. And I guess to spend $115,000 on parking meters that in fact are replacing meters already, from my standpoint, I'd rather not see meters at all and have a computer technologist tell us how to walk around and say, we know that car was parked there. And in Guelph, this has happened, by the way, in the downtown specifically. And since you ask about that piece, it was most recently that they moved those meters out of there. And I do have an associate on the main street of Guelph whose business is doing substantially better now, to the point where he moved one of his stores out of a strip mall and back to the downtown.
You mentioned the survey you did of businesses. I understand you did a survey to businesses about increasing the levy to pay for some sort of complimentary parking. Is that the survey you're referring to?
The survey we're referring to with the 1,137 are the customers who came into our store. And there was another survey that you mentioned, and there were approximately 50 to 60 responses from that, and it was totally divided. It's much like we were in committee or city council on this issue. What I would say to that is, upon further investigation, when we went to some of those merchants who in fact were against complimentary parking, the response was, we already have it. Why would we want to upset the status quo? That's when the proposal came out. What if in fact, as you have discussed, we turn around and put meters back into those two blocks between 8th and 10th? That was never the intent of the DIA to suggest that those meters be put back in. But it was a suggestion that in fact, if you're looking for revenues, it'd be a real easy way to do that, wouldn't it? So.
And just so I'm, the one part in your motion, you talked about removing the meters on those two streets, the DIA would be willing to contribute to that revenue stream.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Derrick.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Parsons, for coming. Just echoing a bit of what Councillor McManaman, we are so late into the process now. I mean, we should have bought the new meters in January or February of this year, and we decided we weren't going to buy those. Well, we allowed the DIA and this committee to investigate the issue and come back to us, and the committee really didn't come back to us with anything, so council tried to move on, because if we spend an inordinate amount of time going back over every single issue that we vote on, and we probably vote on 150 issues a night when we come here, some more important than others, but that many, we cannot just keep going back over them every week after week, because there are another 150 the following week. They don't go away just because we don't have time for them. I am interested, however, and this is probably the first concrete thing that I've heard from the DIA on this issue, is you have said the DIA at a board meeting has passed a motion asking council to expand the complimentary parking on 2nd Avenue East from 7th to 11th.
Correct.
And that the DIA was willing to cover lost revenue for that. Is that correct?
When you say lost revenue, I think the whole project needs to be looked at. And if I could just respond to the first part of that, in terms of this review ad hoc committee, certainly Mr. Ritchie here did a very good job of covering why it is that this whole thing would not work, okay? And there are lots of reasons in terms of the monies discussed and the revenue streams that are there. But there are also not much put into the side of expenses and related to that same, how could we in fact reduce expenses to the degree that this could work. $500,000 goes out and $500,000 comes in this system. I feel that that's, if you look at this as a business model, that's not acceptable. And there are ways and means of making that just a little better, in the sense that if you were looking at it, you would say our wages should be X percentage if you're looking at it as a business model. And we wouldn't be giving away X number of parking permits. We may reallocate, or we may do something such that this makes sense to everybody, but that isn't one of the things you would do. That's not an advertising budget.
I'm not going to debate with you on whether if this was if parking was based on a business model, there would be paid parking everywhere, and it would turn a profit. What the city has tried to do is run a system that does not create a profit, because that's not the business we're in, but that there's also not a deficit, which is why those two numbers match.
That's why I allude to the fact that Mr. Ritchie does a fine job of that end of things.
So the DIA is willing to contribute something to any lost revenue from those two blocks, but at this time the DIA is not willing to commit a dollar figure to that. If the lost revenue was $35,000, the DIA would cover the 35 or 5,000?
As I'm only one member on that committee, or a DIA member, if you gave me the number 35,000, I would fight for that number quite honestly until I got my way.
Okay. All right. So through your works, so.
And I wasn't prepared to use a number, but
well, I think we're at the point where we need numbers. Just sorry, Your Worship.
Yeah, let's try and stick to a question. And it's becoming more of a dialogue, and I think that this is something, the deputation was designed to provide council with information.
I do have a question, Your Worship. Thank you. My question then is, if we paused tonight on purchasing the meters, and we asked Mr. Ritchie what is the lost revenue to the parking system on to add complimentary parking to those two blocks, at our next meeting he says it's X number of dollars. We asked the DIA, how quickly could the DIA get back to us as a council and say, if it's X dollars, we can do X dollars, or we can do something. And we need some kind of resolution to this sooner rather than later. I mean, we've been at this for 6-8 months now.
Well, I would suggest it wouldn't take any longer than 1 month to respond to that, or our next board meeting, given the challenge.
All right, fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Purdon.
So I'd like to thank Dave for providing the deputation and also standing to answer questions. It's a thorny issue, parking, and I'd just like to comment that so much of this conversation that we're having right now, it's as though parking is an orphan. It just sprung out of the ground, fully formed in a way. There's no plan attached to it or policy framework for parking that I can find. It doesn't even belong to a committee that I know of. So it means that we're talking about equipment in isolation, and I think that's difficult for the DIA as well. I appreciate the efforts that the DIA is making to try and work with the city on this, because we're balancing the best interests of the city as well as the best interests of the downtown and the merchants. And I really want to thank you for saying that you're willing to work with us as a city, and I hope that as a city we're willing to work with the DIA to find the best solution. I think parking needs a home where we can be making long-range plans, we can be purchasing equipment in a planned way and not in a reactive way. I'm hoping that tonight in the discussion we have in parking that at the least we find a place where this kind of conversation can happen ahead of time, so we're not having this kind of conversation, which is really difficult to make decisions on the fly and to expect community committees or the board of the DIA to work the way it has on this issue. It's a really important issue for both the city and the downtown, and we really do need a framework that makes it possible to get it right.
New information, new question, Councilor.
I just wanted to be clear to Mr. Parsons, or question to Mr. Parsons, and I was trying to find it in past minutes, and as I'm scrolling through here, I can't seem to find it. I am certain at the ad hoc parking committee meeting, the DIA reps told us if it wasn't a full complementary system, then it had to be an entirely paid system. I'm certain they said that. I think it's been said here at council, that if it wasn't and that was the DIA position. And that's fine if there's a new position. I just want to be ensured there's a motion from the DIA board that
I do believe that what you're saying was never a DIA position. That was one member within the DIA who said that, not myself.
Yeah.
And I won't repeat who it was, but yes.
So there is a past motion from the DIA endorsing...
Never a past motion.
No, endorsing your position tonight.
Yes.
I'm certain it's been stated this.
It's just that the dollar figure, it can't be that outlandish. If you talk about a figure of our entire budget, for instance, then it's not a go. You can't do that, okay? And at one point, that is a number that came close to our entire budget, which was expressed as the number it would take. When we deal with that number, then it's absolutely we can't do it. If it's a percentage of that, and we have to give up certain programs, I do believe that parking is that important to many of our membership. That's why we do have quite a showing behind us. It's that important that we would give up certain things in order to make this a go.
Thank you for that, because I'm certain it's been stated here that if it was all or nothing. So that's an interesting change.
That information, I'm sure, would be in the public record or videotaped by Rogers.
Well, I may have been sleeping when that was recorded, but I've not heard that other than through one individual who, just as I can't commit for the entire board, the DIA board, I wouldn't do that, but I would certainly fight for a stand that made parking a very important part of our program.
Well, thank you very much for your dedication this evening. And is it a question?
Yes.
Oh, question, Councillor.
Well, I do have a question. I would like to make a couple comments, too. The first one is around rescinding motions. We have done a couple this fall. We did the one around the library, and now we're trying to do the one around the parking meter purchases. And it was partly because of the pushback I had from the public. And we, at the same meeting, were working at our strategic plan, and one of the very first legs of it is listening to our citizens. So I felt it was really important to have a relook at the parking meters around that. One of the people, and I won't quote all of them, but one of them was Donna Gorey from Meaford when she was with the BIA, and they went through the process of taking up the parking meters in Meaford. She said it was very controversial, but they are very glad they did it. Their town is very vibrant. And I drove over to Meaford to see, and they do not have any empty stores. It's all about us helping the downtown and those stores have their business. That is the way this is perceived and looked at. It's looked at that people won't shop downtown if they have these parking issues. So I really would like us to, you've talked about that too, about the parking meters. I think the DIA has come out of a plan of just, it's probably a first step to take some more meters out, have some more complimentary parking, and I just think it was a wonderful presentation. The motion about rescinding, could we possibly bring that forward now?
Yes, you'd need to get a seconder to do that.
Okay.
But if you would first let me thank Mr. Parsons for his presentation this evening, and it sounds like there's a possibility that the motion with regards to Councillor Chamberlain's notice of motion may just come forward in a moment. So thank you very much.
It was my pleasure.
Procedurally, we need to come out of formal council, or come out of committee of the whole and go into formal council. Councillor Dare.
I would move that council now move into formal council for the purpose of discussing item 16A, a notice of motion.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain.
Notice of motion that the City Council hereby rescinds the resolution number R-120910-024, passed by City Council on September 10th, 2012, respecting a contract with Mackay Meters Inc. for the purchase and installation of 419 XLE parking meters and 3 e-light pay and display terminals.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Lemon, seconded by Councillor Lemon. Discussion. Councillor Chamberlain.
I could make an amendment to that motion just around the 3 e-light pay and display machines. There's no reason to hold those up. Those are for the parking lots. So I just need a little... well,
that's a little messy procedurally.
Okay, we do the first one? Okay.
Yeah, then we'll deal with, you have a notice of motion here, yes. And I would have to defer to the clerk in terms of making an amendment to a notice of motion. This is a new thing for us.
I would recommend rescinding the motion and following up with another motion with whatever Councillor Chamberlain is suggesting she would like to do.
Okay. So the clerk has indicated we deal with this motion as is, and then if there's a subsequent motion, we'll go with that. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship. Do we need 2/3 majority to lift this? No.
No. Yeah, simple majority. Discussion. Councillor Dare.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering, out loud, if at some point in the next few weeks we accept this very generous offer from the DIA, we are still going to need 300 and X number of meters. I did not, in fact, I clearly heard from the DIA tonight, Your Worship, that they're not willing to come up with the money for complimentary parking everywhere in the downtown, and I appreciate that, and I greatly appreciate that the DIA has come forward with a position that we can actually work with. And I'm willing to do that, but at some point we're going to need 300 and some meters to replace all the other ones if we go with what the DIA has asked us. If we've moved a motion to purchase, if we rescind the motion to purchase, at some point very soon, we're going to need a motion to purchase a certain number of meters. Does anyone on staff tonight can tell me a meter number that would exclude those two blocks? I mean, we need to move ahead on this at some point, and I'm concerned with this on again, off again. Christmas is coming. I mean, the meters have not worked since, or have not accepted the new coins since the new coins hit the streets in the early summer. And those coins are getting into higher and higher and higher circulation all the time. So what we're quibbling about at this point, if we accept the DIA's suggestion, is, you know, maybe 50 meters that we don't need to order at this time. And I'm concerned that if we don't order the meters now, like when are we going to get around to it, and can we even do that? Can we just keep bringing motions forward to purchase meters and not purchase them, and then purchase them and not purchase them, or are we actually going to move ahead at some point on this issue?
There are some flaws in our procedural bylaw, but I'm going to defer to Ms. Corsi, City Manager, for response.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Adair. I think you could word a motion that says to purchase sufficient for the areas excluding that downtown area. But there was a second request, as you'll recall, from Mr. Parsons, and that was to have meters that use credit cards. And that is not what you currently have on the table.
And to be clear, that is not what is on the table with this particular motion. Councillor Lemon?
Your Worship, I agree with Councillor Adair. We certainly all know that we need the pay and display machines. You are alluding just to the meters, but it's also true with the pay and display machines. We need them come hell or high water. And if Councillor Chamberlain's motion passes, I will support meters for the rest of the area excluding those 2 blocks. But I have one question, and that is there are parking meters south of 7th Street on 2nd Avenue East, in front of where the Y used to be in that area. And all the times I've gone down there, I see virtually nobody parking there. Do we have any idea of what kind of revenue we earn from those meters? And perhaps maybe there's a good argument that it's going to cost more to put meters in than we're going to get in revenue.
Councillor Purdon.
I just suggest that we go forward with the resolution, or recalling this motion as the first part, and then look at the next step, which is to make a motion to get meters and the purchase of meters moving forward. I think the sense with this is that we can just have another look at the strategy. And there was an offer with the DIA, which I think is something we need some time. And I think we actually, to be fair, Councillor Adair, we have time. It's not as though meters are going anywhere. We can be timely in making these decisions, and it's not a piecemeal approach. It's trying to make good decisions that are going to stand us well as a city. So it's worth taking the time to do that and to do it properly. And so I would like to suggest that we just do one thing at a time.
Councillor Waddy and Councillor Adair.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Parsons will admit to this, and maybe perhaps did. When we were meeting as a committee, we were talking about a shortfall with their original proposal of $230,000, and they had proposed, you don't have to answer, don't worry, they had proposed somewhere in the neighborhood of $68,000. You know, there isn't anybody, just to be clear, there isn't anybody sitting up here at the council table that does not want free parking in Owen Sound. Let's be clear about that. But, from my point of view, I will not put the cost of that onto the taxpayers. That isn't fair. $230,000 is approximately a 1% tax increase on top of everything else. So that's my position. If we can come up with a way that we can do it without it going to the taxpayers, great. Want to keep moving forward. We asked for a report. Most of council hasn't seen the financial numbers that the cost of parking and everything, it isn't as willy-nilly as perhaps Councillor Purdon thinks it is. There's been 60 years plus of the meters supporting the cost of parking in downtown. There was a report done in 2001, there was a report done in 97, there was a report done in 2009, just 3 years ago, made up of members of DIA, Council, Chamber of Commerce, members of the public, and they all came very strongly and said that there should be revenue generated to pay for the cost of parking. First lot we had to do was lot 5. We did that. We thought we were doing it for a lot less. We didn't. There's obviously some environmental issues that came back to bite us in places we don't want to be bit, and it cost us a lot more money. If anyone's driven through lot 4 across from Shorty's and looked at the big hole as you go in there, the dip, it's pretty clear we're not too far away from spending thousands of dollars more than that. Money has to come from somewhere. It can't come from the taxpayers in my mind. We should be getting a report from parking from Mr. Ritchie in the next couple of weeks. I was going to suggest that we delay this motion until we got that report back. However, I think I will support Councillor Chamberlain's motion at this moment. We can bring it back in 2 weeks after we get Mr. Ritchie's report, so all of council can see all of the real numbers. DIA, the public can see the real numbers, because there's been a lot of rhetoric out there without people understanding the cost of what our parking costs. We can reduce it. We want to reduce it. We discussed that at the committee meeting. There's some things that we believe, Mr. Ritchie believes, we all believe that we can reduce it, but it doesn't come anywhere close to the $68,000 that the DA was talking about in the summer. We're a long way apart, and that's where we came to an end, because we were too far apart. We couldn't come closer without putting it onto the taxpayers, and again, in my mind, that doesn't fly. So I will be supporting Councillor Chamberlain's motion at this point, assuming that it comes back in a couple of weeks when we get Mr. Ritchie's report, and we can make the decision on the meters at that time.
Councillor Adair.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, I think we have spent a great deal of time on this. I don't think we've been making bad decisions for the last 10 years or 20 years or 60 years. So, I'm certainly going to support the motion, because I'm intrigued by what the DIA has put forward this evening, and I'm quite glad that they have done that. But at some point in the very, very near future, like 2 weeks from now, we need to order 300 and some meters to replace the ones that no longer accept the new toonies and loonies. And we need to replace the 3 pay and display machines that no longer take, and they don't just not take them. Let's be quite clear, it's not a vending machine where you put it in, it's not the correct weight, so it comes down at the bottom. It just eats them. And people really, really don't like that. I mean, they don't. And so if it's about customer service and trying to run this like a business, if I ran my business where I pissed people off every time they tried to pay, I wouldn't be in business very long. And I think that as a city, since we know that these machines do not work properly, as they will not take the new coins, we need to replace them with all due haste, not talk about replacing them. We know they do not take the new coins. We are upsetting a lot of customers, not only our customers from the meters, but customers from the DIA. So we need to move ahead on that and stop talking about it, just do it.
Councillor McManaman, and then we'll go back to Councillor Chamberlain for the last word.
Your Worship, I'm confused. I don't know why we need to rescind the motion. The city manager just said we could pass, there's a bylaw before us tonight, we could pass a motion that said purchase the appropriate, I believe that was your wording, amount of meters. After this whole debate, the only thing that's in question are 2 blocks. As Councillor Adair said earlier, they still have to order 350 some odd meters. I don't know why we need to rescind it. Why can't we just amend the purchase agreement?
Procedurally, we have to respond to this somehow. So you either vote against it or you vote for it.
Right, and I'm not sure.
A subsequent motion could be made by any member of council.
Right, I just don't know why we wouldn't move ahead with the vast majority. There's only 2 blocks in question here. Move ahead with the vast majority of everything else. So I won't be voting for the motion.
Okay, Councillor Chamberlain, wrap it up and we'll call the vote.
Yes, I would just like to have the downtown and the public know that we are listening to them, and that we would not be wrong-headed and keep making those decisions about buying the wrong kind of parking meters and the wrong number. So I hope that most people will rescind the motion this evening.
Okay, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Subsequent motion? I was hearing rumors of such a thing.
Your Worship. Unless someone is beating me to a motion, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McManaman, that Council now move back into Committee of the Whole to complete the items listed on our agenda.
We're not doing anything. If I may, Your Worship?
Councillor, yes.
Just to point out, we're not doing anything now.
That's...
Correct, thank you. That's what I thought.
That's the message I hear.
Thank you.
To the clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. In light of the motion, bylaw number 2012-182 will be pulled from this evening to be dealt with at a later time. That is the agreement regarding the purchase of the meters.
Before we go too much further, does any member of council have any direction that they would like to send council on? Where I was hearing a lot of discussion, particularly from Councillor McManaman, around not just talking about this, or it was Councillor Dare, I'm sorry, not just talking about this, but having some kind of a decision come out of this, and the council has just effectively spun this back out into the vortex without any direction. So I'm from my perspective, a bit confused by the decision. However, perhaps Councillor Dare has some enlightening words.
Oh, no, have we voted on mine? We have not, so yes, I do have to stand up. We have been talking for the last few minutes. I certainly know that our staff have been listening. Is it absolutely necessary that we pass a motion directing staff, and perhaps it is, Your Worship, to have two reports to us for the next meeting? One would be what would be the lost revenue from going with complimentary parking from 7th to 11th, and the second would be how many meters do we need to order to cover the rest of the downtown. If you need that as a motion, someone would hand me the proper documents to do that. I would so move that if there is a seconder. I'm not sure that the mayor's recognized mine.
Is there a seconder to that motion? There's no seconder, it does not fly. Councillor Lemon?
Your Worship, I really believe that we can order the pay and display machines. Nobody anywhere that I know of is arguing with the pay and display machines that go in the lots that need to be replaced. Also, the DIA had never requested certain areas be deparked. I don't know how you call it, taking the parking meters out. First Avenue East, First Avenue West, etc. So why couldn't we order some of the meters so we can solve the problem of the meters not working, which everybody knows creates complete and utter frustration amongst the public and shoppers. And then in a discussion I had with Mr. Ritchie some time ago, he indicated we could order the meters in two parts if that was possible. And Wayne is nodding his head in agreement. So why not order the meters for the areas that nobody's arguing about, and then we could order the others if we decide we're not going to do it later. And I really feel that that would be in keeping with what we've already done tonight. And since the DIA request is only for those two blocks, it is not rocket science for someone to go out and count how many meters we don't need. I mean, most people can do that very simply, and it would take probably not more than 20 minutes to half an hour or to maybe an hour. And then we could move forward with those meters. And the city manager has suggested a very reasonable way to word the motion so we could acquire those and get going on that part of it, and we can order the other ones if we need them later. We don't have to order them all at once, folks. So my motion is that we go ahead with a partial remetering, particularly the pay and display machines at this time.
Okay, so I still need a seconder to some motion.
Clarification to the mover. Thank you, Councillor. So your motion is that we buy pay and display machines and meters for everywhere but 7th and 8th, 10th to 11th.
But the councillor has it completely correct. And if we want to, and Wayne has agreed, and maybe he could speak to this, Mr. Ritchie, rather, I'm sorry, Wayne, that we could order the other ones if it doesn't go ahead later and at the same price.
I would be happy to move Councillor Lemon's motion that we buy the meters and the pay and display machines.
We have a motion on the floor. The city manager wants to get in.
Well, I don't really, but for clarification, we were not going to be ordering meters from 8th to 10th. So are we now ordering meters for that area?
No.
Not
So
now.
there's nothing.
If this motion passes, we'll know the area.
We won't be ordering it for that
Or if this
area.
motion fails. Councilor Manman?
Just for clarification, so we're perfectly clear, we're talking about ordering pay and display machines as has been,
Got
and
that?
enough meters to cover everywhere but 7th to 11th.
On 2nd Avenue.
2nd Avenue. So 350 or so meters. The number will be determined tomorrow morning.
And just so I'm clear, are those the meters as we had originally priced them? So those are the ones that take coinage. They are not the ones that take credit cards.
Okay, is everybody clear on the motion? Councillor Wright and...
Thank you very much, Your Worship. We are getting a report in 2 weeks from our staff regarding parking, regarding costs of parking, regarding meters, etc. Why are we not waiting until we get that report to see what we want to do? We may want to replace all the meters, we may want to not have any meters, I don't know what we're going to do with it. But why wouldn't we wait until we get that report? The ticket spitters have to go into the parking lots. I can certainly see us ordering the ticket spitters, but we may get that report and decide we want to go with more ticket spitters. I know at the time, we wrestled with this at bylaw for how many meetings? 2 or 3 meetings trying to figure out, do we want ticket spitters, counting them, how many meters, etc. A number of motions went through bylaw that didn't get accepted. The report was brought back to council and then it wasn't, I don't believe, accepted. But I just don't understand why we're not waiting until we get that parking report to make a decision on how many meters we need.
Any further discussion? Councillor Dare.
Thank you, Your Worship. Speaking in favor of Councillor Lemon's motion, we have had the discussion, quite fulsome discussion, about whether we would be buying ticket spitters to replace the meters or whether we would be getting meters that take credit cards. We've had that discussion. Since we're now moving to the point where we need to do something, I support Councillor Lemon's motion that we move ahead with the kind of meters that we've already determined we need in the amount that we need, excluding those blocks. So I will be supporting Councillor Lemon's motion.
Councillor Purdon.
I'm not supporting this motion because I feel it's very, very confusing. There's a lot of figures that have been thrown around, certainly in bylaw. We really question whether we even need to, the type of investment we're putting into equipment when we don't even know if the equipment is going to be what really stands in good stead for the downtown area. And I think that's exactly what the conversation has been from the DIA, to give us an opportunity to think that through. We had a lot of discussion at our last council meeting about the different types of meters if we have them, whether we stay with old equipment or move forward. I think there's so many questions, and I think it's a good idea to get it right. So I can't support this motion. I'd really like to see the staff report. I'd like to see the numbers. I'd like to see the DIA come forward with what they're willing and able to contribute. And I think if we need to have stop ticking off all of the customers downtown, we can just not be taking the money out of the meters right now, hood the whole bunch of them until we've got this figured out. and just deal with that and get this question answered.
Okay, we do have a motion. Councillor McManaman.
Your Worship, I absolutely have to respond to that. We have had this discussion over and over and over again. The only thing that's in question tonight, the only new piece of information we have was the DIA saying that they would now contribute for those 2 blocks. In my mind, we discussed the pay and display meter. We discussed the types of meters. We discussed we need $230,000 to have a free complementary system. All of that has been discussed at great length. There is no, the only new information is on those 2 blocks and the DIA proposal that we received tonight. Everything else we've had and discussed at great length. So I'll be supporting Councillor Lemon's motion.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. The motion on the floor, Councillor Lemon, seconded by Councillor McManaman. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. And that was a long and informative discussion. Moving along, we're at public question period.
Point of order.
Oh, yes, we need to go back. Thank you. All those, did you make the motion to go back to?
Thank you, Your Worship. You should have that on your desk.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We're back in committee of the whole. Public question period. Is there any member of the public here this evening who would like to ask a question of council? Could just state your name and address for the record.
Worship, 565 2nd Avenue West. My name's Scott Cameron, former chair of the Marine Rail Museum, and I come here as a citizen. And just a preamble, that I understand that there is a report being tabled tonight on the closing of the Marine and Rail Museum, and so my questions pertain to that issue. Am I clear on that, first of all?
Yes.
Okay.
So far, the questions are easy.
I think all the questions are easy, but maybe people don't know the content of the question. First of all, I'm sure that many of the people know the importance of marine history to this community. 95% of all the propellers that were made for the Canadian Navy in the Second World War were made in Owen Sound, right beside the museum. The first passenger steamer to be launched in the Upper Great Lakes was the Francis Smith. It carried 1,000 passengers. It was called a palace steamer. It was so beautiful. That was launched 400 yards away from the existing museum. Did you know that the first steel ship built in Canada was built in Owen Sound? These are questions, rhetorical questions. Did you know that the Canadian Pacific Railway launched their whole operations out of Owen Sound? And did you know that they were the route from which immigrants came to this country? And did you know that those people went on to open the Canadian West? Their launching pad was right beside the museum. Did you know that Russell Brothers produced more than 1,000 vessels, including the Maid of the Mist, right nearby? And finally, did you know that the Hindman Corporation was one of the longest living corporations on the Great Lakes? So my basic question is, number one, are you committed to your official plan for the harbor as a cultural center? And if you are, then that museum in its location is critical. These cultural icons are who we are, and they take place on our waterfront, not at Grey Roots. And to help you make a decision, just happen to have first of all, here's a question. How many of the council members have read my book from Francis Smith? 1, 2. And I'll give you a copy, each of you, and would you please read it before you make a decision? Who else needs one? You don't have to get them back. It's a courtesy. I'd like to read it. Reread it. Why don't you get the one that you want?
Library. I think it was.
So this is the book. This is the first steamer built on the Upper Great Lakes in Owen Sound, right at the location of our Marine Museum. The place is important and it deserves to be recognized and remain as a cultural icon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to ask a question of council this evening? Mr.
Councils, I'm Wayne King. I live at R3 Owen Sound, and I own Riddell Contracting in Owen Sound. I would like to make a point about the museums, or the museum, and then I would like to ask about 3 questions about the closure of the museum. Did you know that $1.8 million budget of Grey Roots, 16%, almost $289,000, is paid for by Owen Sound, and the Meaford Museum has a budget of $129,000, while Collingwood's is about $500,000. The Marine and Rail Museum in Owen Sound has a budget of $43,000. Have you considered the costs of moving the tourist office to the City Hall? Have they been accounted for? Has the council recognized that to lease the museum, structural changes would be necessary for a heritage building? And being a heritage building, I'm almost certain there can be no changes made to the structure in any way. And finally, would council be willing to consider ideas from stakeholders, donors, which is myself, educators, and citizens at large before accepting recommendations? And I would also like to say that the Marine and Rail Museum belongs in Owen Sound. It does not belong at Grey Roots. There's a great history around that museum, and I would feel that very strongly that it should stay here in Owen Sound. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public here this evening who have not spoken who would like to ask a question? Seeing none, we will move along. We have 3 pieces of correspondence which requires the attention of council. The first is the request for support of a resolution from AMO regarding the arbitration process. Councillor Wright?
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that we support this request.
Okay. Any discussion? Certainly, our comments and our meetings have been heard by all the parties at Queen's Park, and AMO certainly has been very resourceful and supportive moving this whole issue forward. So pleased to see this here tonight. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We have a request for nominations for the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal. Oh, Councillor McManaman might want to come back in.
Do we have to?
There we go. It's best to assign those things to staff. Yeah. Councillor.
Committee to return this over to.
So I'd like to move that we present this to the 2 committees, the Parks and Rec Committee and to the Community Planning and Heritage Committee to receive nominations as requested for the Diamond Jubilee.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. We have a request from the Grey Bruce Residential Hospice, or as I heard someone refer to it on the radio the other day as a hospic, to waive the rental fees. What is council's direction on this? Councillor Lemon.
Your Worship, we have a policy, I think, or we had, where when the monies raised are going for the betterment of our community, that we do not charge. And that applied to the Kiwanis Club, it's applied to the Scenic City Order of Good Cheer, and there may be others that I'm not aware of. Is such a policy in effect, or do we have such a policy?
Thank you. Director of Community Services.
Through you, Your Worship, there is a policy. It does provide for the city to provide a grant equal to the amount of a rental charge. It applies where the funds being raised are to a city service or capital projects. So the projects of the order where they're raising money, for example, for the splash pad would be eligible. But a greater community isn't envisioned in the policy as it's written.
It bothers me.
I move that we note and file, Your Worship. We have a very clear policy about this. The hospice is very, very important to this community, but there are many other things. My wife is doing some pro bono writing for this group. We certainly plan as a family of contributing financially to this after our experience a couple years ago where a hospice would have been of a great benefit to our family, but outside of my personal financial and moral support for this, that can't really sway me in how I vote. There are many things that are very important. This one's certainly near and dear to me, but so is everyone else's project to them, and we have a policy, and so I would note that we follow our policy and note and file this.
Motion is to note and file. Councillor Chamberlain.
Yes, I was going to support Councillor Adair on that. I did speak with the financial fundraisers in that group today, and they are aware, and they will be looking for a sponsor to cover that piece. And they are doing some good work. In fact, their first fundraiser is this Friday night, which is a jazz festival type of thing called the Noodle Factory at the Roxy. And they'll be working hard, and we will all be supporting it. But this is outside of our policy to do this.
Yes, I also support the motion, but wonder whether we need to do some work to let community groups know that council as a whole, we can't entertain these types of requests. Because it seems like we have them coming up, and we're always sitting here having conversations about how worthy and important they are, but how the city can't help. So maybe the public needs to know that.
City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship, through the Councillor Purdon. We advise members, anyone who applies under these circumstances, but they still have the right to submit their request. So they are advised that the best messaging is a consistent dealing of these by council, and then staff can advise accordingly.
Okay, further discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We are at item 12 on our agenda. We have a series of consent agenda items. What is council's direction on these items? Councillor Boddy.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll move the consent agenda.
Thanks for the promotion.
What did I say?
You said Your Honor.
Oh.
That's good. Oh, discussion. Councillor Chamberlain.
I just wonder if I could pull out the the housing minutes, I just wanted to comment on, last week there was a very nice dedication to Robert Wenting, and now the Housing Office, Administration Office is now called the Robert Wenting Administration Office, and I just wanted that to comment about that from those minutes.
That's a very fitting tribute, and thank you to you and Councillor Lemon for representing me. That was certainly well past due for Mr. Wenting. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. We have a series of boards and committees or reports, I should say, from various departments. First up is the report from the city manager and the curator director with regards to the Owen Sound Museum's review. Is this a PowerPoint or is this
Virginia will be commenting.
Okay.
And I would like, if I could, just to thank those people who came out tonight to express their comments and concerns. We have heard them. We will be addressing them. This is not about shutting a door. This is about opening a door from my perspective. And I'm going to let Virginia carry on from that messaging.
Thank you for those comments. We're just having a little bit of technical difficulties.
What's going on?
It's the newspaper. This is the first page of it. Is it that one?
No, that's
yeah.
No, that's mine.
Oh.
Is it?
No. Do you already
Oh,
have that one?
there. Kristen's got it.
Oh, they got it up there. Okay.
So she just switches between the two whenever.
Great. Okay.
Go ahead.
All right, thanks. Thanks for the assistance with the technical glitch. As the city manager said, the report on the future of the museum, it isn't about closing doors. It isn't about doing less. It isn't about forgetting part of our history. In fact, it's about making sure that we actually continue to have a viable, vibrant, exciting cultural history being presented here in Owen Sound, and in such a way that it is actually drawing upon collaborations, drawing upon shared resources, growing, relevant, and hopefully we'll be bringing in new audiences and new audiences and new supporters of the gallery and the museums. It's very timely having this discussion right now. This was an insert that was actually in the Toronto Star and in the Globe and Mail on Saturday, and it's called Breaking the Mold, all about looking at different ways that museums are changing, are evolving, are approaching new ways of maintaining and expanding and growing and honoring their mandates. In particular, and this is the quote from the final part of it, is that for museums that want to stay relevant and in business, experimenting and staying fresh is essential. If they don't, they risk marginalizing themselves and going out of business. And that is true across the board. Our museums are a wonderful resource. We have some great collections. We have really wonderful staff. We have amazing volunteers. We've got a board that's very interested in embracing a new strategic direction, envisioning what more we can be doing. Over the last 6 months, we've actually accomplished quite a bit, and we've been moving forward in this new direction. Again, far from forgetting what our past is, we're actually looking at new ways of delivering our programming in order to make sure that we reach really wide audiences. Over the last 6 months, we've been working on a number of outreach programs for children. We've developed 18, 11 of which are based on our marine and rail history. We are doing the Bringing Museums to You, which is a program devised for seniors to go into the senior homes and bring artifacts and information about the collections for those who aren't able to come to the museums themselves. And this template that we've been working on actually is something that other communities are interested in using as well. So what we're inventing here is something that can be beneficial for other communities. We are working with Grey Roots. The museums and the TOM are working together. The city and the county are working together. This is really a good news story. It is something where everyone is invested in doing the best exhibitions that they can, doing the best programs that they can, but also ensuring that the artifacts, which are the heart of our collection, are being properly preserved, properly taken care of, and are going to actually have the most opportunity for being exhibited, out, seen, and enjoyed by the greatest number of people. Change like this is not unusual. It is not something that doesn't take place in museums. It takes place in museums from the very first time the first public museum opened, which was actually at the end of the 18th century. You have museums like the Seagram's Museum, which started off in Waterloo. It eventually moved out of its original home. It became the City of Waterloo collection. It shared premises with an art gallery for a while. Now it has its new permanent-ish home in the shopping plaza there, the Waterloo Mall. And it's getting lots of people interacting with it, lots of people coming and checking out their exhibitions. They're getting a great audience. The Museum of Contemporary Canadian Art in Toronto was originally the Art Gallery of North York, moved downtown to Queen West. It's now going to be closing its location where it's at now. It's changing its name from the Museum of Contemporary Canadian Art to the Museum of Contemporary Art, looking at either possibly pairing up with the Power Plant Art Gallery or producing exhibitions that will be in partnership with other galleries across Canada. So there are many ways for a museum to be. There are many different manifestations of a museum. But what we do need to do is we need to keep being vibrant. We need to keep being relevant. We need to keep finding ways to do what we're charged to do as the custodians of a community's history to ensure that future generations and present generation are going to get the best exposure and the most positive interaction possible that they can. And so that was the basis of my recommendation for this report. And I would invite any questions or comments.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll have a few questions. Thank you for your presentation. Councillor Lemon.
Well, Your Worship, through you, one of the things that Scott Cameron very carefully reminded us of, and Mr. King as well, that little area right around there was Colson's Foundry and Black Clawson Kennedy Foundry, etc. There is huge, huge significance to those sites. And we haven't really done a lot, and I think that was part of the message there. Mm-hmm. As an example, right across the street from me, there was a reinforced bomb-proof building built on the Kennedy Foundry by the federal government at their expense to protect the propeller molds. And in case somebody from an airplane dropped a bomb on it, it would be a long flight from Germany, and I don't think they had planes that were certainly capable of getting across the ocean, much less this far into Canada. But the reality was there was a huge significance to that, an immense significance. And I'll add one other thing that wasn't mentioned. Owen Sound, I believe, I know, was set up as a military port with protection for the harbor with the North and South Ordnance Reserves, where cannons could be in place to blow any American ships coming up the harbor out of the water. Now we welcome them, but at one point in our history around the War of 1812, we weren't quite so generous. And the other thing is, the first instance that I've been able to read about the Merchant Marine for Canada sailed from Owen Sound to the Lakehead to take troops to fight in the Riel Rebellion. And there are wonderful photographs of the returning troops and the whole city decorated and the train stations decorated because they were going to go from the boats on the trains and back to Toronto and other places in Ontario. So there's a huge amount of history in that area, and I think that's something we have to consider in what we do.
Yes, through your worship, yes, I totally agree, Councillor Lemon, but I think there are lots of different ways that we can be looking at how we interpret that and how we honor that. One of the grants that I've been working on recently actually is in regards to creating, as we did with our Tagurip as part of the Canadian Spirit Project this summer, site-specific installations throughout the downtown, but also having it animated by actors in period dress, talking about the different events or life experiences, things that were going on in those particular areas at that time. And again, I think that's a really great way of kind of taking something from outside of a building and actually putting it in the public purveyance, where a lot of people are going to get an opportunity to engage, get the information, and get a different kind of experience.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Purdon.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. Just a few questions about these plans. When I read the report, I could certainly understand the transfer of the rail collection to Grey Roots. I thought that seemed to make a lot of sense.
Not in its entirety.
No, but just in generally speaking. But I was struggling with the idea of the marine collection and the whole focus on the waterfront for, I think, similar reasons to what Scott Cameron was saying. How do we celebrate our waterfront? You had some examples there, different ways of doing that. But it is a very fine building and kind of a focal point on that side of the harbor, and we don't have a focal point on the other side that's a cultural focal point. So I think that's where I'm struggling with this, is where is our cultural focus point in the downtown harbor area if we're not going to have that building?
Yeah. And again, through you, Your Worship, this is where we can be looking at different alternative projects. There could be events, and this is some of the things that we'll be looking at over the next year as we're in this transition. But I think that it is an opportune time for us to really reinvestigate how we've been doing things like this. Again, the Marine Rail is a lovely building, without a doubt, but it is challenged as a museum space, and with the number of staff that there are, I know in the report it said there's 3.5 staff, but in reality that's one full-time staff person, one person 4 days a week, a contract person on 20 hours a week, and then another person who's about 10 to 15 hours a week. In that case, when you've got the Billy Bishop Museum and you've got Marine Rail Museum, even though we do have really wonderful, wonderful volunteers, what it has meant is that a good amount of time both of the museums have been closed. So there hasn't been the access to the programs. There hasn't been the access to the collections.
Yes, and I certainly understand that and support that, consolidating staff and locations. I think the question to you and to the people who are thinking about this is, where is the cultural anchor for the harbor and the waterfront?
Yeah, and I think getting feedback about that is really important. It could certainly be something we could bring forward to the Cultural Advisory Committee and bring that within a broader community discussion and get feedback and get ideas and see what sort of projects we'd want to go forward with.
Councillor Adair.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't believe anyone's moved the recommendation. This time I would like to move the recommendation. Certainly, things are always changing and museums need to change. You don't just put things in glass cases and hope that people come in. In fact, if that model was working, we wouldn't be having this discussion. People are not... It used to be that people went to museums twice, once when they were a kid and once when they had kids. I think what museums and art galleries and a lot of other cultural organizations are trying desperately to change that paradigm that exists and get people coming back and repeating them. And you don't do that by doing the same thing over and over and over again. So I think this, this is, as you have quite eloquently explained, is a door opening to preserve that collection and make sure that that collection is seen by as many people as possible. That's really what those artifacts are about, is being seen and interpreted and understood. So I would like to move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Okay. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. Just a few comments and questions. While we all appreciate the passion of Mr. Cameron and Mr. King, or see Mr. Henderson here as well, I really do think this it's about sustainability, it's about viability. Yeah. It's, and as Councillor Adair just put it, preserving the collection and promoting our heritage, really. If we weren't having this discussion tonight, let's be honest, we're having it 2 years from now, we're having it 3 years from now. I think it's a necessary step. As far as our heritage in the waterfront, I hear what you're saying, and I think we need to have some thought about that. It doesn't necessarily have to be 4 walls, though.
Exactly, and in fact, you know, there is the whole movement within the museum world that is called the Museum Without Walls, and this is where community outreach and community programming is as important, and this is through the funding bodies that we report to as well. It's what kind of audience engagement do you have? What are you doing within your community? And it is it far extends beyond any kind of wall or case.
A couple of specific questions.
Yes.
Why this discussion around this museum, and why this and not the Billy Bishop?
The Billy Bishop Museum and Home is a nationally designated historic site, whereas the Marine Rail isn't. The Billy Bishop Museum has greater flexibility and space for being able to continue to create exhibitions, and it has better storage space.
To the city manager, does this have or perhaps to you, the board, what are the board's view on this?
The board has been supportive and very involved in all of the discussions as we've gone along.
The current budget the city has, or grant the city gives to the Marine Rail of roughly $35,000 or so, you don't address that in the report.
Well, during 2013, that is really going to be the transition year. So, you know, any of the transference of the artifacts, the whole sort of closing down of the one space or transferring over, we're looking at several months at least in order to get everything all undertaken. So 2013 budget, I am requesting that it stay the same as what we have, with the expectation of the 5% decrease from the year previous. And then as we go into 2014, we'll have more of a sense of where we are and can address what's going on at that point.
And a last question to the city manager. It talks about tourism moving into City Hall. The hours of City Hall are not particularly in line with, particularly for weekends, tourism. And so that question, and then where at City Hall is the other question.
Your Worship, through to Councillor McManaman, we can isolate office space at City Hall to be open on the weekends if necessary, fairly minimal cost, so we are looking at that. But we also think that the model has changed as we've come into a web-based world. People find their information in a variety of ways. One of those could be a kiosk. One of those could be a screen, if you will, an interactive screen in our lobby area that could be set in a way that it could be open, but we could equally have staff. I didn't put it in this report, but throughout Grey County, we spend a lot of money on tourism, and we've got to find the most effective way to do that. This has the benefit of getting people downtown. The main part of our tourism office is getting visibility through other mechanisms, through advertising, through being at events. That has nothing to do with actually being across the counter from someone. So I think those combined, it is an option that can work. I think we will probably see staff located in the area now where we have our heritage planner, and do a bit of shuffling in that area. We're always dancing a little bit for space at City Hall, but we have some other options as well for a couple of the other things that we do there.
Thank you.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Just a couple of things. In the report, it says that Grey Roots will receive many of the, I don't know, I'm not able to see that great tonight, but it says many of the artifacts. What about the rest of them?
The rest of them, pieces will stay with at the Billy Bishop, because we'll be maintaining part of the collection there as well. Then if there are pieces that were donated by families that are still here, we can look at deaccessioning and returning the artifacts to the family, or also looking at other community museums that have marine and rail history but might not have our collection. And if there are pieces that would be helpful for them, then we can transfer the ownership over to those museums as well. And the whole legacy of them having come from the Owen Sound Marine Rail Museum will be maintained in their history as well.
And the other point I would like to make is just that if, I believe any agreement you make to send these things out to marine, or to Grey Roots, there should be a tag in there that says if the city ever leaves the county, those things come back to the city.
Your Worship, we can certainly consider that, but I'm not sure that that's something that I can tie us to today.
Well, I think it's important to maintain the city's heritage. I've always felt that one museum for the county would do the job, but then I realized that we need to have a heritage in our community as well, and I'm not 100% certain that I'd like to see this go, but I can certainly understand the rationale, and I do think we need something down there to bring people into our community, and as has been mentioned before, but anyway, however, thank you.
Councillor Body.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to follow up on Councillor Wright's point. Is it not possible and not common to maintain ownership of exhibits and loan them?
Yes, you can.
So that is a possibility. I was going to say, I've got a 14-year-old son at home who now communicates more with his thumbs than he does with his tongue. And I'm watching that generation that is much more accustomed to, I fear, not going out and doing things as much as waiting for things to come to them, whether it be on the screen or whether it be in their school or whether it be wherever. And so I very much like the idea of the exhibits and the items being moved around so that more people are able to see them, use them, learn from them. And I had some concerns, like Mr. King, about what we can do with the building, and I think we could be limited with all the laws as far as if you're going to put a licensed restaurant in or anything like that. There's a lot of requirements for fireproofing, et cetera, that we may have limits on what we can do with that building. However, I would also hope that we're able to find something that we can get more people into that building and more people down around the harbor and use it more as a draw than I think it has been. And I think there's great potential with that train station and the other side of the harbor, the other train station. As well as the harbor itself, I think, is a cultural piece that we don't necessarily think of it as that, but it is. It's a very important piece of our history and culture, and it's there, and it isn't going away. And so I hope this is an opportunity to draw more people into the area. I'll be supporting the motion. Thanks.
Councillor Twaddle.
Thank you, Your Worship. Two things. One, it's my understanding that the climate control in the Marine Rail Museum is not appropriate for maintaining a number of the artifacts.
It's challenging.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. I mean, the last time I was through there, I was pretty concerned about some of the things, for example, there was, I haven't been there for a while, a dugout canoe that had been dug out of a bog that was just mounted on the wall. And it struck me that that probably isn't the best way to preserve that artifact, although I'm not an expert. So I think from that point of view, at least Grey Roots was designed to provide, I think, a better level of climate control for preservation of artifacts. When Mr. Cameron was making his quite passionate comments earlier, and I was struck by his enthusiasm for the history of the waterfront, and it put me in mind of Vancouver Harbor. And if you walk around Vancouver Harbor, you will find plaque after plaque, vantage point after vantage point, with something in front of you that explains either what you're looking at or what you can't see anymore that used to be there. And we have a plaquing program throughout the city. We focused on Harrison Park this year and for the 150th anniversary. There are many more opportunities to put this kind of information out along the harbor, around specific things that, people are out there being active in our parkland or in our heritage district. We'll have an opportunity to look and understand, and now with QR codes, about which I know absolutely nothing, except I do have a fancy new phone that if I learn how to use it, I'll be able to use QR codes. But again, we can add so much more to the experience. What I would really like to see going forward is a plan using some of the savings that may be here to put more information in front of people in a public area, because if there are 100 people who walk down the West Harbor Wall in the course of a day, one or two of them perhaps might step inside the museum. If you can put the information out along the harbor wall, then 98 of them might have an opportunity to look at it at least once. So I would like going forward to see some of the money that we save put into recognizing and celebrating the heritage. And I think the last couple of heritage, all the signage in Harrison Park for the trail signage all has QR codes that take you there. So I think this is something that we can continue to develop and actually make it a lot more interactive and a lot more real to people who are standing there than the current model. So I certainly support the motion.
Councillor Levin.
Well, one of the things that really I think we have to have a long discussion of, and that is the large buoy that's right adjacent to the museums and the ship.
The buoy?
Buoy or buoy, whatever. Those should be by the harbor. Taking a ship that was built at Russell Brothers and sailed on the various parts of the lakes and putting it landlocked doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's taking it totally out of its context. Being beside the harbor is within context. So we're going to have to do a lot of thinking if we do make this move about certain artifacts, which I will definitely vote against moving and placing out at Grey Roots, because they really belong next to the harbor. Because it tells something about our past. And it isn't, and those are attractions. In the same token, that railway car, if you saw the number of people who go over it, I live very close to there, so I see the action. And some of the outdoor exhibits there attract more attention, perhaps, than even the indoor ones. I think we have to give recognition to that.
Through you, Your Worship. Yes, Councillor Lemon, there will be the Ancaster and the Big Boy. Definitely add to that site. They're a good example of kind of an artifact, public art, if you will. And they'd be great actually to have more information with a QR code stand beside them, and I will happily show Councillor Twaddle how to access the QR codes.
Education, Bill.
You're old.
Councillor Adair and then Councillor Chamberlain.
I was just going to mention that, you know, we can do this with a permanent loan, or I don't know that we have to give the collection to Grey Roots. There are lots of interim steps, you know, as that they can hold them in trust or whatever. I'm not worried about the what the ownership arrangement might be. There's lots of models of how we can retain ownership, but that people actually get to see them by having them somewhere where people are going.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Yes, and I'd just like to give our Mrs. Eichhorn our vote of confidence in what she's been doing. I know she's had this position of looking after the two museums and the art gallery for 6 months now, and from the board of directors who are quite on side with her plans. I really think that I would like to go forward with that too.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? We do have a motion on the floor from Councillor Adair. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried.
Great. Thank you all very much.
Councillor Body.
Could we move number 11B10, which is report of the events facilitator, tall ships coming into the harbor, which seems to be a good segue, if we could move that up to this position?
If I might, Your Worship, I believe the number of members in the audience are waiting for number 3. If it would be appropriate to...
If we could bring 3 forward, Councillor Body.
And then do the tall ship?
The Sowerby-Doherty plan can go home and have some evening left. Is that amenable to you? Okay. This will be faster, I think, than Mr. Cleverly's presentation. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, so we're on item number 3, starting on page 77. That's a report from the city clerk with regards to a request for land sale lane, part lot 184. What is council's direction, please? Recommendation? Councillor Wright.
I'll move the recommendation, Your Worship, that this go to a public meeting to receive comments respecting the proposed stop-up, surplus, declaration, and sale.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. Have a good evening. There are next steps to come, but you're over the first one. Okay. Now I will ask Mr. Cleverly, if you would come forward, please. You have an update. This is item number 10, Council, that is coming forward at this time.
Thank you, Your Worship. And Councilors, it's my pleasure to be here tonight to have an opportunity to speak to my report and to give you a little bit of an update. What you're going to see on the screen is essentially a kind of a rah-rah summary of the report. And I think that it's, just give me one sec. I would be lost without my notes. I'm sorry. I think it's significant that every 3 years it seems that there's a big event for Owen Sound to rally around. In 2004 we had the Cultural Capitals of Canada. We were the Cultural Capital of Canada. In 2007, of course, we had Owen Sound 150 and Homecoming 2007. 2010, we had the Olympic Torch Relay, and we all remember the excitement around that. I think what's coming next year is going to be one of the most exciting events that we've had, and it's in 2013. So I don't know what it is about every 3 years, but that's a good cycle from an event facilitator's perspective, because sometimes it takes that long to pull together something on this scale. And I think it's important and significant to note that we are not an isolated community in doing this. Similar to the Torch Relay, you know, we're joining up with many other communities to make this happen. In 2013, the Tall Ships Challenge for all of North America is in the Great Lakes. It is the Tall Ships Tour for the year 2013. There are 14 communities participating. I know you can't really see that, it's a little fuzzy. 14 communities in Ontario, including 5 in southern Georgian Bay, and there are 7 U.S. ports. So the tour is taking place largely in Canada. I have attended several organizing meetings so far, including 2 provincial meetings, one in Amherstburg and one in Toronto, and a regional meeting as well in Midland. And there's another one coming up of all the ports in Toronto at the beginning of November, which I'll be attending. And at that one, we're going to meet some of the ship's captains for the first time. There's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of momentum that's building here towards this event. You'll see the logo at the top of the screen there. That's the official logo for the Ontario portion of the tour next year, Tall Ships 1812 Tour, recognizing the connection with the War of 1812. I'm just going to sum up, give you some of the bigger picture with these next 2 slides, and as well a very, very brief point form about the exciting aspects of what's happening here in Owen Sound. So there's going to be up to 25 tall ships touring around the Great Lakes next summer. As I mentioned, one of the themes is commemorating the War of 1812. We're also promoting U.S. and Canada cross-border cooperation. And other themes from the event include water conservation and sail training for youth. All of the tall ships that are involved, as far as I am aware, involve sail training for youth, some for adults as well. But they're all about training people how to sail. And of course, there's a lot of other things that relate to that for youth in terms of leadership, in terms of teamwork, in terms of self-reliance, in terms of self-esteem, and so on. So it's very exciting to be able to host these ships here and to promote these themes. Our event is going to feature a minimum of 3 tall ships. When the ships come, we will be offering deck tours, which is often the really exciting element for the public, to actually be able to go and see the ships up close, sometimes even be able to go below decks. When they leave, it's much easier to organize generally an outgoing parade of sail, which will be on the Sunday, August 18th of the event. And I forgot to mention on the first slide, of course, and point out the dates of the event next year, August 16th to 18th, 2013. So the outgoing parade of sail on Sunday, August 18th. There will be the opportunity to have receptions on board. People can actually book the ship and have an evening reception, whether it's cocktail, dinner, etc. And there's the outside chance that perhaps we may have a ship that's available for day sail excursions as well, though that is not confirmed at this point. The tour is funded in part from provincial grants and sponsorship. I'm not allowed to talk about the provincial part quite yet. I'll explain that in a little bit, although it is confirmed. I'll give you that assurance. And it's the tour is produced with assistance from provincial and regional tour organizers, and they're really on the ball, I have to say. And it's looking like we're going to have a lot of help from the large corporate community in Ontario to make this happen. Marketing is going to be province-wide. CTV is confirmed as a media sponsor, as a TV sponsor for the event. And also there'll be a regional marketing campaign, and we're working quite closely with the other communities in southern Georgian Bay around that. There's going to be lots of opportunities for local businesses and community organizations to be involved. We get to the exciting numbers. Based on similar events in other communities, we're expecting to draw at least 10,000 people to the harbor over the 2 days, the 2 main days of the event, and 4,000 people purchasing boarding passes for the deck tours. The good news is we actually have capacity, probably with those 3 ships, of even more than that. And we're going to have an entertainment program that's included in the budget for the event, which will include music going on in the entertainment tent down on site in the big field on the west side of the harbor. And we're trying to arrange some historical reenactors, some historical interpreters in period dress to be involved in the event as well. And we're just going to look at the ships that, there's not 100% confirmed, but these are the three that have been designated for Owen Sound at this point. The first one is the Fair Jeanne. She's based in Ottawa. It looks like a little toy sailboat up there, but she's actually 110 feet in sparred length. Which is a very impressive thing on the water for sure. The Playfair, which we're used to seeing here every summer, is a sail training vessel out of Toronto. We often see her with the Pathfinder. She's a 72-foot sparred length. And then the big one that we're anticipating is the Pride of Baltimore 2, 157 feet sparred length. That's twice the length of the that's like the Pathfinder and Playfair put together, and then some. And its rig height is 107 feet. Just imagine seeing that out in Owen Sound Bay as it comes into the harbor. We may have an international visitor. There is a lot of hoops that have to go through for this to happen, some of which are financial, some of which are logistical and legal. So, but we're hopeful, and I got my fingers crossed on this one, that we'll be able to make it happen. And that ship is the Tarangini from India. It's part of the Indian Navy, and it is 177 sparred length. 177 feet. Its rig height is 114 feet. So there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes already. I've had some help from Captain Sean O'Donoghue. He actually put this diagram as we were having a dialogue around information that I needed to provide to Tall Ships America in the States, and he whipped this together for me. I gave him some input, and he realized it. We are looking at the west side of the harbor. You can barely make it out, but these are the orange stripes on the west side of the harbor, which is the left side of the screen there. So that's where we're looking at putting most of the ships. We also have, in the yellow is indicating where some additional ships could go. Not anticipating that we'll have that many, but you know, the space is there at least. Possibly if we have the big one come in from India, it may have to go on the east side, since there simply may not be enough room for all of them on the west side. And the open areas are indicated on here as well. And I can just make use of my new little device here. Right up here is the big open field north of the Marine and Rail Museum, and that's where we would be placing the tent, and having the ships lined up along the west side of the harbor here. There's not a lot of space, but there is enough space to marshal the crowds there. I think we can come up with a plan that will be acceptable for public safety as well as for the comfort of our visitors. So there's going to be lots of volunteer opportunities, and first of all, as mentioned in your report, we're looking for an honorary chairperson for the event, and that's appointed by City Council. We're going to be looking for a volunteer coordinator as well. Again, this is a volunteer position. A really critical role is a ship liaison officer. These are people who are based in Owen Sound, take all the information about the ships that are coming to visit, and are in fact the ambassador in Owen Sound for that ship, and the point of contact for that ship and for its captain, both as they're coming and when they're actually here. We're going to need somebody in charge of media relations on site, hospitality, gangway construction, critical role here. We'll be looking for some carpenters to help us with that. Crowd control and security, also very critical role. And then there's lots of other things like passport stampers, docents who are people who can act as ship guides, and information people to man kiosks and stuff like that as well. So a lot of different roles. I don't know exactly how many we're going to need, but it's going to be somewhere north of 50 volunteers, I'm sure. Opportunities for the community organizations as well. When we have the entertainment tent, we're going to be looking for food and beverage service there. There's possibly going to be parking monitoring to be done. I'm not sure if we're going to be charging for parking. That's one of the things we have to look at. We certainly want to have a shuttle service, possibly on the water as well as on land, and there may be an opportunity to have craft vendors on site as well. It's good to give people lots of variety, different things to do when they come down to the harbor to see the tall ships. Certainly, there's going to be a lot of sponsorship opportunities for local businesses. The critical one, of course, is to have an event partner, the one that gets to put their name on on everything in connection, in association with the event. We'll also be looking for businesses to sponsor each individual ship. We may be looking for a parade of sale sponsor, depending on whether we get one at the provincial level for that or not. We'll certainly be looking for entertainment sponsors for the stage and for the entertainment tent. Media sponsors, of course, is an opportunity for local media sponsors that are not in direct competition with the provincial sponsors. And then there'll be a boarding pass book, which will have lots of advertising opportunities in it as well. I'm almost done. Next steps, just a few things that we've thought about that need to be looked at in the fairly near future. The province is going to be announcing something very exciting with respect to the Tall Ships 1812 tour, and we're certainly going to want to follow up on that to the media. This is why we don't have a media release for you around this. We're waiting for the official announcement from the province, and then we'll be releasing all kinds of details around this. We'll be doing some grant applications. We're going to be including Employment Ontario. We're looking at the creation of possibly a couple of positions to support a project coordinator for this. We're working on confirming which ships we're going to get, recruiting sponsors and community partners, as we mentioned. We want to start selling the boarding passes online as soon as possible. I'm hoping to have them ready to purchase by December 1st so that people can purchase them for Christmas gifts. And we're looking to hire a project coordinator in early 2013 to basically help guide the ship all the way through to the completion of the project. And that's about it for me. I just wrap up by saying I'll see you in 2013 at the Tall Ships. And I entertain any questions through your worship.
Thanks very much, Doug. This is such an exciting event. I know that everyone's looking forward to it. And I'll remind Council, it was a year or 2 years ago when we had a naval vessel pull into the harbor, and there were over 3,200 people that lined up to have a tour of the ship. So I can only think that given the vintage represented by these ships, the numbers are going to be triple or quadruple that. So I think this is a great event for the city, and it's a great event for the region. Is this the same weekend as Summerfolk?
Yes, and I didn't mention that in my presentation, but we are working with Summerfolk. I mean, one of our big problems, of course, is that there's not going to be any accommodation available. So every single campsite within 100 miles is going to be taken, as well as, of course, all the hotel rooms and so on. It's an ongoing issue that we have, lack of hotel space, but I think that we just have to take that one. But we are working closely with the Folk Society. They're actually, we don't have we're working towards an agreement, but I think we're in very, very good positive ground in terms of that, and they're basically looking after the entertainment component of the program, and we're working on joint marketing and some ticketing incentives as well.
Well, it's all about collaboration.
Yeah.
Councillor Lemon.
Speaking about collaboration, one of the things living near there, I've noticed that the Intertownship Fire Department, when they have events like they're having a breakfast to raise money for children, etc., this weekend, as a matter of fact, and they get permission from the owner of the former Black Clawson Kennedy site and park cars in there, and you could park 500, 600 cars in there. It's basically 2 city blocks in size. There's one area where you wouldn't be able to park, but the cars seem to be able to park in there without any difficulty. So I don't think he's going to have that site completed by next year if we continue at the present rate, or lack thereof. But this might be something to look at, because that would help with the parking. I mean, I'm not
tremendously. Yep.
I mean, they're all going to go past my house, so. But anyway, I think it would help out.
Question, Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. Do you have any, in other events like this, those boarding passes, what are they worth? I know it's probably too early to say exactly what we might charge, but...
Through your worship, Councilor McMahon, we were told that they tend to be pretty inexpensive, between $10 and $12. Now, we have to work that out, of course, the numbers. We want to make them not ridiculously expensive. We'll look at a possible student discount. You know, we have to look at all those kind of details. But there is a lot of information, there's a lot of data available to us around that. We're not going to be charging Toronto prices. Toronto charged quite a bit more for their Tall Ships event, and they got the money, but we know we can't compete. We can't charge Toronto prices.
We can charge.
For the senior recommendation, you're asking about a voluntary or an honorary chairperson, and I'm just wondering, Your Worship, would that be something you'd be interested in taking on?
I'd be more than happy to.
I'd be, I'll move the recommendation that we accept the Mr. Clevery's report, and I would move that the mayor be appointed as honorary chairperson.
Ahoy!
All those in favor?
Watch out for pirates. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you very much. Thanks for your presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I look forward to having the opportunity to give you some sea lingo, and so you're properly prepared for that.
Being a galley, I can't say the word, but I worked in the galley a lot on my family's boat. So they may, yes, they may those expressions may come back to me like, get me this.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So that worries me. Okay, we have a report from the city clerk with regards to an amended agreement for the purchase of sale on 89th Street East. What is council's direction on this, please? Councillor Purdon.
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We have a report from the deputy clerk with regards to Barfoot, Hiscox, McLaren, request for land purchase, road allowance adjacent to 1795 Fifth Avenue East. What is council's direction? Councillor Wright.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I took a look at this. Actually, I was up there about 6 or 7 weeks ago, and I looked at this situation, and it's a very what should I say? It's a minor road. It's not a road that's well traveled because there's nowhere to go on it. It ends up at the escarpment, and there's very few houses in that block. Talking with our director of planning, the road is actually a road and a half, and there's a fairly big road allowance that runs beside it. And I think that the fact that we have been taking a look at all of our property with the view of selling it to raise some money and also to bring in revenue, I think that this is an opportunity that we have to sell this portion of this road if it's possible. And I know that there can be 2 lots put on this, which would be building lots, which would bring revenue into the city and would not upset an awful lot. But on speaking with our Director of Operations, he tells me that if there are services underneath there, and I understand there could be phone, telephone, or gas services under there. And so I think that from my perspective, I would like to know for sure if the services are under there. And so I would ask that this be deferred for till our next meeting, so that that information could come back to us and let us know if there are services under there, and if they're not, then we could take a view of selling this right away. And I'm talking about selling it. I feel that it should be market value, and if there's a cost, I think it should be borne by the potential buyers. So that's a motion to defer.
Motion to defer for 2 weeks' time. To the motion, Councillor Twaddle?
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I certainly support that. I think that the reasons for recommending not doing this are largely vague. They're very conditional, may, and I think exactly as Councillor Wright said, you know, we're looking at opportunities to sell property in order to increase revenue. These would be infill lots, which is exactly what's recommended in the provincial planning policies and in our own official plan, and to be supported. And I think we need to base a decision on more definitive knowledge. I mean, this road was, road allowance was created, well, Councillor Lemon's not here right now, but I'm sure he would tell us that they were created in order to get the cannons down to Ordnance Park so that we could defend against the Fenians if they ever came. I think, yeah, so I think that, that we need to have more information. And again, if there are utilities under the road, for example, electrical services or telephone services, there could be the possibility for an easement. I don't know that, but those are some potential as well. So I just think we need more information before we make a final decision on this.
Sounds like you're going to support the motion. That's
absolutely.
For sure. Councillor McManaman.
Well, thank you, Worship. Those comments were exactly mine. I think we should do a lot more. The reasons for not doing it need to be a lot more concrete than this. So I'll support the motion.
All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We have a report from the Deputy Clerk with regards to our 2013 council meeting calendar. And the motion, or the recommendation is there. Councillor Adair.
Thank you, Worship. Be happy to move the recommendation, and I am glad to see that we won't have that long summer hiatus that we did this year, when it seemed months went by before we met, and then we had all of the stuff to go. So I'm glad that this is a little more balanced than what we ended up with this year. Thank you.
Very well. Also, I'll make note to council that there will be 4 to 5 additional meetings on those off Monday nights, which will be opportunities for council to tour businesses and or local facilities, institutions, and so on in a more informal format. So the recommendation, all those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We have a report from the purchasing agent with regards to the T12-23 4th Street East Sydenham River storm water outfall. And that was the report that came onto your desk just prior to tonight's. It was also emailed out earlier. Thank you. You know, this is one of those ones where you just sort of, you plug your nose, and it just... Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. Especially with this new report, could I ask the director to maybe just, or could we ask the director to go over this, particularly the new numbers and how to fund it? I think that would be useful.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Certainly. Through you, Your Worship, just to update, this new supplemental report was basically brought forward at my request through discussions with the Manager of Engineering Services, who is actually here tonight if specific questions need to be answered. But the intent here was basically to reduce the, I guess what I would call the burden on pre-budget approval on our capital budget for 2013. So we looked at what projects we had that we could defer or put off, which one was the 7th Street storm sewer outfall. There was an underage in that project, and which of about $75,000, which allowed us to be able to put $75,000 towards this project, and also that we could defer the Brook Basin engineering design work by about $47,500, and that would provide us with approximately about $140,000 worth of funds available to put towards this project. So really what we're asking for is council basically to pre-budget approval the difference remaining, which is roughly about $50,000 for 2013. Substantially less than the original report, which had requested, I believe, a $260,000 reduction, or $252,000 commitment for 2013.
Thank you. Any further questions or discussion?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendation.
Discussion? Councillor Lemon?
Just one question. Will some of this work start this year?
Through Your Worship, yes, it will start this year. Actually, we have a requirement through to get this work completed by the end of January.
Thank you.
Good to see the MOE is working with us.
Yes.
Okay, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We have a report from the community planner with regards to site plan approval for 888 3rd Avenue East, the Dairy Queen. I believe that's an ice cream place.
Gee, what do you think?
Yes, we could. What is council's direction on this? Councilor Burton.
Recommendation?
Thank you. It's always a positive thing when there are more opportunities to buy more ice cream. All those in favor?
Just quick question.
Sorry, we have a comment here.
Thank you. No, certainly I support the motion. I just have a question. This is a relatively minor site plan approval, and we have a process in place that allows staff to do this, and I'm just wondering why this one came forward. It just adds to the time sometimes.
Through you, Your Worship, you'll see that in the report, and I guess just to answer the question, in the downtown, in the C1 area, the staff delegation of site plan approval, even for a minor application, isn't allowed. All site plans in that area. You'll see that Mr. Popovich has moved this forward quickly, and to keep the developer moving, in fact, there's a bylaw for you this evening contemplating council's approval. So we have tried to, in this case, streamline it, given the size of the development.
Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. It certainly is yet again another testament to how quickly planning and engineering can work to get developers rolling. We have a report from the Heritage Planning Coordinator with regards to heritage property tax relief and some agreements with some owners. Recommendation on page 114. Councillor Adair.
Thank you, Your Worship. Move the recommendation. This is what we would hope would happen when we brought this in several years ago after a very long process and talking about it for years before that. Just curious, how many properties have taken advantage of this by now? How many properties do we have under this scheme?
I believe there are, through you, Your Worship, 14.
Oh. Councillor Wright.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I just have a question, and I'm sure that I was told this, but I can't remember. Why are we allowing it on the educational portion of our tax? I thought we still have to pay the education portion.
The province, in creating the opportunity for the city through the Community Improvement Plan to offer the program, also provides for the incentive to be on the education portion of the taxes.
So the province is taking the 20% cut in the education tax?
The city and province share it. It comes
share.
out of both of those things. Is that correct?
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Body?
Thank you, Worship. I note at the bottom of the report there's comments about increasing the budget. Is that in our budget deliberations coming up? Is that?
Right now, it's prorated so that the property share their amount of the 15,000. It's not a large increase. It would be up to about 17.5. So certainly working with the Director of Finance, we could include that in the budget for the next round of pre-budget if that's Council's wish, just to see what that would do.
Subsequent motion. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you, Worship. Just clarification. Councillor Wright's question was about education taxes, and you said we share it.
Province.
We split the education taxes?
Through your worship, no, the province pays the full education deduction, and we pay our share of the municipal portion.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Councillor Body.
Your worship, move that, what are you doing? I guess we're asking for a report from staff with regard to the very small increase of 2,500 for the 2013 budget to come with our budget deliberations.
Your worship, we can certainly, at the next pass of our budget on November 13th, and make it to 17.5, and we can see how that affects the bottom line. It certainly is relatively insignificant.
Thank you.
Okay, that's the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We have a report from the Director of Operations with regards to a sale of an airport hangar. Page 128.
We may have missed item 9, Your Worship.
Oh, I did so. I'm sorry. Thank you. We have a report with regards to the former CPR station, restoration phase 2. Thank you. Councillor Burden.
I'd move the recommendation to issue an RFP for the maximum $15,000. That's to complete or to do more work on the CPR station.
Comments, questions, discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. We have covered 10, and we are now at item 11, a sale of airport hangar. We'll go to the Director of Operations. Any comments on this particular recommendation?
Fairly straightforward. There's a little bit of housekeeping. Unfortunately, it's about a year old, but basically just a transfer of a hangar property and just a renewal of or a transfer of the lease under the new name.
Okay. What's Council's direction? Councillor Body.
Move the recommendation.
Thank you. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We have a report from the Manager of Public Works with regards to the winter maintenance level of service, and I would remind Council and staff that tomorrow night is the first public information meeting to invite members of the community to attend at the Bayshore to learn more about the what we do hope will be the new and improved winter maintenance schedule. So I will hand the microphone over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to bring some council up to date on the process here, of course, last council meeting we brought forward the principles behind the program. This is essentially a policy that reflects that, basically reflects the level of service we're proposing. This is basically being brought for you for just basically your information at this point in time and for public to be able to have an opportunity to review it over the course of the next 2 weeks. We will have 2 information sessions over the next couple weeks, one being tomorrow night at 7 o'clock at the Bayshore Arena Complex. And then subsequently, I believe it's on the next, well, not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday, I forget what date that is, 23rd, I believe. We'll be having a second session as well, so that the public will have plenty of opportunities to be able to come in. We'll have displays as well as a presentation beginning at 7:30.
Okay, what's Council's direction on this particular report? Councillor Wright. Okay, and the recommendation is to receive the report?
That's right.
Council, thank you. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question to the Director. As I read through this, and perhaps it's my misunderstanding, but I had thought we talked about the level of service for hills, and perhaps this is just my misunderstanding, because I thought it was all hills as opposed to just arterial hills. But with the number of hills in Owen Sound, I'm just, the one comment I've been hearing from people, maybe others have heard it, is the question about hills on a secondary street, a secondary road. You know, so, anything with a big incline, I guess I'll call it, and I know that's very subjective, but this policy doesn't address hills at all on secondary or non-arterial roads. That's correct?
What it does is basically looks at primary and secondary hills. If you go back to, if we had a report from last council meeting, Figure 2 did outline, identify all the primary and secondary hills that would be covered. Essentially, if they're not basically distinguished for that purpose, then they would fall within the classification of that road which it belongs to.
So there's a specific, just so for people at home, there's a specific classification of hills, and they should take a look at the hill in their area if they're concerned about it.
Correct, yeah, but if there's nothing designated on this that's basically been identified as strictly as a hill, and these are hills where we basically see high traffic volumes or also are fairly steep, such as your 10th Street Hill, they're being identified as primary and secondary hills. Any hills that are part of, I'll call them gentle slopes that are part of a local road network aren't necessarily distinct from any other hills. It will be just dealt with as in accordance to the level of service associated with the classification for that road.
And is that specific point in the policy about the hills?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll have to find it. I didn't see it in here, but that's good to know. And that will answer my question, because people were concerned about their hills. They knew they were on a secondary street, so they can take a look at that map and they'll know what's covered and what's not proposed to not be. Good. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Councillor Purdon.
Just the question about the dead-end streets and streets that are going to be plowed in if there's not going to be clearing happening for 48 hours. I could use the street I live on as an example. It's already a problem. Sometimes you can't get out onto 2nd Avenue because it's plowed shut. So we talked about this last time. Is there any policy, or is it just going to be on an as-needs basis, whoever phones? Or
well, I mean, certainly that's, when we have a large storm event, that will be somewhat more of a problem when you have a large windrow like that. We basically have managed the system in the past with respect to local roads. We'll probably continue to do things to try to avoid those. There's quite a few in here. But thank you for the comments.
Councillor Chamberlain.
I'd just like to compliment this group for putting on these public information sessions about this. There were quite a few concerns, and I just think this is the way we need to deal with it. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. We have a series of minutes, boards and committees for approval. It's council's direction. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. I'll move the minutes and note in the Recreation and Parks Committee minutes. There's a note for council and those watching. There's a public meeting. I'm just trying to bring it up here as I speak. On the minor sports subsidy and tournament rates. Monday, October 22nd at 7 p.m. at the Bay Shore Community Center. And that's an opportunity for all the minor sports groups or people interested in the subsidy. As you see in the report, it's being proposed to reduce that subsidy to minor sports, and so that this is an opportunity for the groups and individuals to come forward and hear the proposal, and we'll hear from them. So that's next Monday, October 22nd, 7 p.m. at the Bay Shore.
Okay, Councillor Twaddle.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to draw attention to the minutes of the wastewater treatment plant committee. This is a very significant, we're on the cusp of making a very significant decision, and that is to engage the engineering firms to do the design engineering for the upgrade to the wastewater treatment plant. I think it's important to note that we did a very detailed request for proposal process that was actually in two parts. The first part was the technical proposal. Second part, in another sealed envelope, was the cost. And what we're left with is that the company that, or the two companies that partnered, that made the proposal that scored the highest on the technical side, were J.L. Richards and Conestoga Rovers. They also had the highest cost on the, well, the second envelope was opened after the technical review was done by staff and by our consultants who did this process. Even when the scoring was included for price, they still scored the highest, but there's a real concern because there's several $100,000 between the proponent with the highest score on the RFP and the next proponent. What council is being asked to do tonight is to direct staff to begin negotiations with the proponent who scored the highest but also had the highest cost, to bring the cost more in line with some of the other proposals. This is a two-generation project at least, maybe three, just judging on the age of the existing primary treatment plant, which I think was opened in 1963. This is a very important step forward for the City of Owen Sound. We want to do it well, and we want to do it right. It's also the biggest and most expensive project we've ever taken on. So I think it's important that we look at this very carefully, and certainly that's what the recommendation tonight suggests. Certainly a member of that committee, and certainly support the recommendation that that we're making. But I think it's important to note that this is another milestone in bringing this project forward. This is the beginning of the real detailed work for this project. Thank you.
Further discussion, Councillor Lemon.
Well, Councillor Twallow certainly expressed the concerns that were at that meeting because of the variance between the next tender. It was many hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I think this is a different approach, and hopefully we can get some reconciliation of price, because you know, every dollar we can save is important, but on the other hand, we also want to make sure that the engineers are completely the best, because it'll come back to bite us again if we don't.
Okay. Any further discussion on any aspect? I may comment on the one item with my incredible idea to dissolve the wastewater treatment plant advisory committee. However, upon a few discussions with some colleagues around this table, I would say that it's probably best left until January, when all the committees of council are under review, and rather than a one-off situation. So I'll just make that note known. Any other discussion on it? Councillor Lemon.
Yeah, this is actually on Parks and Recreation minutes 2012-09-13. I'm a little confused by a line here, just near the top of the page, first paragraph. This section would reflect a 3% less subsidy of the adult rate on the same declining basis as outlined below. I didn't think we subsidized adult sports. And so this line is saying we do, in effect.
Director of Community Services may have a comment on that.
Through you, Your Worship, I'm not certain what page the councillor's on, but the idea...
It's page 4 of 5 at the top of the page, and the paragraph starts out, the subsidy ice sport organizations will be reduced by 3% each year for primetime ice.
So, Your Worship, the adult subsidy would remain 0, or the full rate. The youth subsidy would be reduced at 3% per year, from 30% to 27 to 24. The schedule of reductions is shown in the draft policy.
Okay, so I was misreading that. I was thinking that there was a subsidy on the adults and there isn't. Good. Thank you. I was having a small panic attack that we were subsidizing.
0 stays 0. Any other comments or discussion on any of the items in any of the minutes of the boards and committees for council's approval? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. We have a few in-camera minutes for approval. Council's direction. We have minutes of in-camera meetings, Owen Sound City Council in-camera, September 24th. And the confidential one, I think there's a typo. I think it's actually October 15. Is that correct? Oh, yes, there were 2 sets of in-camera minutes. And Councillor Lemon.
I would move to approve those 2 sets of minutes, D1 and 2.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We have 1 set of minutes. This is for receipt, and this is the Owen Sound Downtown Improvement Area Board of Management in-camera meeting. Council's direction. Councilor McManaman. Motion to receive. All those in favor? All those opposed? That motion's carried. Thank you. Items of other business. We have Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to comment that it was awfully nice to be at the attack hockey game and not have buckets of water sitting all over the concourse. It was, I want to thank the Director of Operations, Brad McRoberts, and through him, Craig Rupenthal, for pushing and getting that roof fixed. We didn't look so bad Saturday night with all our visitors in town at the hockey game, so that was great. Thank you.
Hear, hear.
I have a question I really don't want to ask before we go into formal session.
Councillor Derrick.
I have an opinion on this, but I'd like the clerk's opinion of which motion in regards to the bylaws she would like me to read.
The one that you tore in half?
Yes, I believe it's the one that I've torn in half, but
It would be the one that does not include number 182. Does that help?
no. Well, that's...
We'll take a short recess if that would make it easier. 2 minutes?
Council, well, I don't know. We can take a recess. I can ask the clerk, but what I'm asking is that...
We'll take a 3-minute recess. Thank you.
Oh, the one with them rescinding it.
And I understand that we've resolved the concerns around procedure. I would now ask for a motion that the committee rise.
The committee rise, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Dare. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion's carried. Thank you. Now informal council. Resolution adopting proceedings in committee of the whole, please.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McManaman that the actions taken in committee of the whole in considering public meetings, deputations, public question periods, matters arising from correspondence, excuse me, reports, matters tabled, motions for which notice was previously given, and other business be hereby confirmed by this council.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion's carried. We have dealt with item 16, new business by resolution, bylaws.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McManaman. Bylaws number 2012-174, 175, 176, 177, 178, 179, 180, 181, 182, and 183 be hereby passed and enacted.
Councillor Lemon?
Your Worship, through you, I thought 182 was pulled. Was that not the bylaw to purchase the original number of machines?
It was, it's specific to replace the replacement of the parking meter heads, acknowledging the following motion. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
The bylaw speaks to executing an agreement with Mackay Meters Incorporated, which we can continue to do with the direction for the reduced number of parking meters that was passed.
Thank you. I just wanted clarification on that.
It's good stuff. Okay. All those in favor? Those opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.